So way back when I was reading this book, The God of Old by James L. Kugel, I was just kind of casually, going through it, and a line stuck with me that probably wasn't supposed to, but it did anyway, and just the line was, "The consequences of true monotheism." In this book, there's a lot of discussion about, the early origins of, the God of Old, the God of the Old Testament, the God of early Judaism. And really, the idea that there's only one God in all of existence, that is a newer concept in the religion. That is not at all how people always thought, and that book kind of goes over a little bit about that. But when we think about this term, the consequences of true monotheism, really what those consequences tend to be is the idea that every other god is fake, is a demon, is out to trick you and deceive you, when in reality, none of that is true. And in fact, the Bible itself will point out the fact that yes, other gods do exist, and God has regularly engaged with them, whether to fight with them, whether to just kind of be ambivalent about them. The Torah, the Jewish Bible, doesn't really make a bunch of claims that these gods don't exist. The claim they do make is that God is the one high God, the one above all other gods. And in fact, the first evidence we have that there are other gods in existence actually pops up right in Genesis. Genesis 31:53. Let's take a look. Now for context, this is a passage where Jacob is picking up his wives and kids and running out of the servitude of one of his family members, Laban. Laban, who is the son of Nahor, who is actually the brother, I believe, of Abraham. So while Abraham was following the God we call God, his brother Nahor was continuing to follow the other gods of, traditional Mesopotamian religions at the time. And so let's start at the top of the passage at 51. "And Laban said to Jacob, 'Here is the mound, and here is the pillar which I have set between you and me. This mound shall be witness, and this pillar shall be witness that I am not to cross to you past this mound, and that you are not to cross to me past this mound and pillar with hostile intent. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor,'" which my Bible now puts a footnote, "'their ancestral deities, judge between us.' And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac." And so you have Laban and the God of Nahor on one side, and you have the God of Abraham and Jacob on the other, and they are brokering a peace deal because Jacob just kind of left his servitude, and Laban was like, "Hey, wait, you still owe me. You still owe me time and labor and all these other things," and Jacob said, "Hell no, I don't." And in fact, Laban's own daughter steals the idols from him, basically. Idols being, according to The God of Old by James L. Kugel here, actual houses for the deities. Like those statues, those figures of the gods, were actually things that people tried to pull their gods into to bring them out of heaven and closer down to earth so they could better and quicker, help the people that worship them. That's why God says, no idols, because he does not want to be stuck in a stone. They have a whole Ark of the Covenant and other things, a whole temple build model in Exodus that they go through in extreme detail. That is where God chooses to come hang out in. He is not trapped in it. He is not stuck in a stone visage of him like these idols have been. Which, if you think about it, it's kind of less about no idols, and in my mind, more about just basic respect. Don't trap people in a stone prison. Our next example of where we can see that there are other gods going on is actually in Exodus, and this is mostly explained in the footnotes of this Bible, which are written by biblical scholars. But there is, Moses, right? And he has his wife Zipporah. Well, her father is a priest of, Midian out here in this kind of area called Midian, and while he does not renounce other gods, he does recognize God as the one high God. So let's take a look at, Exodus 18, about 10 or so. "Blessed be the Lord," Jethro said, "who delivered you from the Egyptians and from the Pharaoh, and who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods." Not saying that the gods don't exist, but that God is just top. And so the footnotes of the Bible actually explain this part, which is really important. "Jethro recognizes God's superiority, though he does not renounce other gods. The Torah does not expect Gentiles to become monotheists, only to recognize God's superiority when he asserts it. So if you are not an Israelite, the whole idea of having only one God, it's not binding to you. It's not even binding to you. If you are a Gentile, you don't have to do that. You just still have to recognize God as the one high God. You shall have no other gods before him, right? And the last and probably most obvious place that we see that there are other gods understood and recognized in the Bible is Psalm 82. In fact, the God of old does come to explain this in that this psalm was likely written around the time that the Israelites were exiled into Babylon. And while the Israelites have their own traditions and their own customs and laws and, rituals that they have to follow, they were in this foreign land surrounded by a people who were doing all of their own festivals and rituals and traditions to other gods. The Israelites had no choice but to watch these other gods provide all these blessings and favor on these people, and had to recognize the fact that they do hold some sway in the whole fabric of the universe, at least a little. And so here all of a sudden comes Psalm 82, where God is sitting at the head of a council of other gods, and here's what he says to them. God stands in the divine assembly. Among the divine beings he pronounces judgment. How long will you judge perversely, showing favor to the wicked? Judge the wretched and the orphan, vindicate the lowly and the poor, rescue the wretched and the needy, save them from the hand of the wicked. They neither know nor understand, they go about in darkness, all the foundations of the earth totter. I had taken you for divine beings, sons of the Most High, all of you, but you shall die as men do, fall like any prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for all the nations are your possession. And again, the footnotes of this Bible note that the word for gods here is Elohim, which does mean gods, plural. And it says this. The notion that other divine beings exist is found elsewhere in the Bible, although they are never equal to God. In later biblical thought, these beings serve as God's ministering angels. So some people, to cope with this idea that other divinities clearly exist, tried to just make them into angels, and we can also kind of see this in texts like the Greek magical papyri, in which a lot of spells were invoking not the god Helios, right, god of the sun in Greek mythos, but the angel Helios. But as you can see, true monotheism was not ever really how people thought about these religions. They didn't necessarily condemn all other deities as demons. It was mainly the ones God was fighting with, right? Like Baal or others that were having a hard time. These were the ones that God, cast out or beat down or something because they were messing with the Israelites, and so they got rebranded as demons, when in reality they were still gods of, the Canaanites, the Mesopotamians of the area, just by standard. But as we can see, this does fold into the idea of Henotheism, in that all gods do exist, but God is the one most high, superior God. In fact, I also just got done reading this book here, Christians as the Romans Saw Them, and that is precisely what actually Greeks and Romans of the Roman Empire thought. They believed that they were the gods, like the Greek gods, Zeus and Apollo and all them, but above that was the one high invisible God from which all things stemmed. And so they had this idea that the Jewish people of the Roman Empire were worshipping this one high God. In fact, the Oracle of Apollo even says so. One oracle of Apollo says, In God, the begetter and the king before all things, at whom heaven trembles, and earth and sea and the hidden depths of the underworld and the very divinities shudder in dread, their law is the Father whom the holy Hebrews greatly honor. That's an oracle of Apollo saying that. But what's really important and interesting to notice was that in Greek and Roman polytheist thought, to them, worshipping lesser deities, like, the visible gods, which were the stars and things, the daemonies, the heroes, which were kind of the equivalent of saints, worshipping, the gods like Zeus and Apollo, the Olympic gods, worshipping them was not offensive to the one high invisible God, because the one high invisible God made them all. And therefore, to worship them was still pleasing to this one high God, because you were still worshiping him and his messengers who are there to help you with specific things. So the Capitolina gods in the Roman Empire, Minerva, Juno, and Jupiter, these were the gods of the state. They were the ones that kept the empire itself stable and kept every city in order. Worshipping them was to kind of give them that energy and honor they deserve to keep the city safe. and that was in service of this one high invisible God. Obviously for Israelites, there's something different going on here, right? There's kind of an exclusivity put upon them specifically. But per my own Bible's footnotes, Gentiles were never expected to have that kind of exclusivity. They were just expected to acknowledge God as the very tippy top of the divine pyramid, which a lot of people seemed to do at the time. So as far as I'm concerned, other gods absolutely do exist, and I mean, why wouldn't they? While all this is happening in the Near East, all of this, the Bible, the Torah, while all of it's going on, the people of the Scandinavian area, the people of the British Isles, or of France, or of the Americas, of East Asia, had no idea what was going on with them, and had no idea what was going on with the One High God. They were just doing their own thing, worshipping their own gods that were serving them in their specific area. If we think of them all as sons of the Most High, as agents of this One High God, then it's kind of easy to say that while God was busy in this one section of the world here, kind of moving and shaking and doing all these things in these Bible stories, the other gods had the fort nailed down wherever they were. Ancestral gods are important. And in my own experience as a Slavic person, I do feel a sense of familiarity with the Slavic gods, as if they watched over for a little while. Even if I believe my soul originated from God's creation and from God's fashioning, it's the Slavic gods that held on to it for a minute while God was busy doing the great conundrum that was all of the Abrahamic religion's text. Now, whether or not this means you can worship other gods, to me, is a little bit of a sketch topic. As far as I'm concerned, if you want to work with or worship other deities, I'm not going to sit here and tell you you can or that you can't. The real truth is you have to go ask God. Ask Him for permission before you do things like this. Show Him that deference. Show Him that respect as the one true Most High God. That way, you're going to make sure you don't screw around. So I asked God if it's okay for me to talk to the ancestral gods that I have. Kresnik, Vesna, Veles, Morana. I asked him, is it okay if I have them, around, if I chat with them to get closer to my heritage, to understand them better, to get connected to those old traditions on that way? He said yes. Okay, great. But if he said no, then that's a no. Whether it's just because it's not time for me to do so, whether because he doesn't want me to, whatever. Sometimes God will say, focus on me right now. Sometimes God will say, you know what? You've got a problem that I think this deity can help you with. It all depends on what's going on right now and what you need. I think one really good example, honestly, is the idea of God being a heavenly father, right? So as a woman, it's kind of weird, right, to go ask your dad to help you feel pretty. It's just kind of weird. But your dad might pull in some friends, or people with that experience, women friends who can hype you up and give you their knowledge and expertise, just like God might pull in, I don't know, Freya or Lada or even Nama, any kind of, whether it's an infernal or a pagan deity, anything like that. God is the one Most High. Why would He not be able to recruit them at whim? But the main focus of this is to say that when people tell you, oh, there's no God but one, how can you be a Christian and believe other gods exist? Because the Bible says they do. Because the Bible very clearly makes mention of them and puts them into the fabric of this religion, because to say that they were not real was to be blind of the world around you at the time. How could you possibly say these gods weren't real when you were watching them hand out blessings and gifts and all of this wealth and abundance to your enemies? And of course they made up things to explain why and how and what God did after. But there it is. And the die like men part is interesting, because if you look at a lot of the stories of pagan deities, you do actually see people dying like men. You've got the Dagda of Irish mythology, the husband of the Morrigan, dying in battle. You have Osiris being killed by his brother, betrayed, and just split up across all of these nations. You have half the Norse gods dying in battle in Ragnarok. But for gods, death is like a different thing. Death is just kind of like a pause in the underworld, a rest, and then still being active and able to influence things. I mean, damn, Jesus is the Son of God, and he died not only like a man, but in one of the most humiliating and horrific ways possible. So think about that. But with all this said, I do hope that this kind of helps you ease some discomfort around the idea of other gods, that they're not demons, they're not out to get you, they are ancient and very powerful and divine beings that are here to help you. And when you ask God for permission, and he allows it, they can really add some things to your life and get you more connected with the rest of humanity on ways that maybe you didn't think were possible before. So with all that said, I hope this helps reframe that a bit, and I will see you guys next week for some magical tips. See ya! By the way, if you want to see these videos 2 weeks earlier, consider subscribing to my Patreon, where you not only get all these videos, but also recipe cards, specific deity profiles, and lots of other interesting things to look at. Video tiers start at $10 a month, so definitely consider checking it out.